We start with the big story, and it is not just the coronavirus pandemic that has stemmed from China. A Pentagon report claims that within the next decade, the Dragon wants to double its nuclear arsenal. China is also set to complete a nuclear triad, which is the ability to deploy nuclear weapons on land, air and the sea. All this while the world is dealing with a deadly pandemic which emerged from China. Pentagon report claims that China is attempting to double the number of nuclear warheads in its arsenal in the next decade, that is, within the next 10 years. Chinese nuclear warheads are currently estimated to be slightly more than 200, between 200 and 300. Now, this number includes those that can be fitted into ballistic missiles, even capable of reaching the United States of America. The Pentagon report also reveals that by the next decade, China may be ready to pursue a nuclear triad to conduct nuclear strikes by land, sea and air. In contrast, India's nuclear stockpile is close to about 150 weapons currently. Earlier this year, China's Communist Party-backed newspaper, the Global Times, said that Beijing needs to expand the number of its nuclear warheads to 1,000 in just a short span of time. Currently, China has only 2 of the 3 legs of the triad operational, but it is developing a nuclear-capable air-launched ballistic missile. In fact, the Trump administration has long sought to include China in its nuclear arms control talks with Russia, something that Beijing has resisted consistently. On the contrary, the United States nuclear arsenal has an estimated weapon strength of about 3,800 warheads in active status, 3,800. US has submarines and aircraft that are capable of delivering a nuclear strike along with intercontinental ballistic missiles on land. Now, the Pentagon report expresses concern that China may have already achieved parity or even exceeded the United States in several military modernization areas, including shipbuilding, land-based ballistic and cruise missiles, and integrated air defense systems. Meanwhile, even as the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic that emerged from China, Beijing has stepped up aggression against most of its neighbors, including India, Taiwan, Japan, and the countries in the South China Sea region. Joining us on this broadcast now is Patrick Falk, who's joining us live from Beijing. Now, Patrick, this is an alarming report. It's a Pentagon report, a U.S. intelligence report, which claims that China will double its nuclear arsenal within the next 10 years. Now, is this a message to Washington by China? But even as we speak, I'm just getting a message that China's foreign ministry has, as expected, said that U.S. report is filled with biases and that we reject it. But Pentagon believes that China will do it.
Well, yeah, there has been a response from the foreign ministry just a short while ago, in fact, to say, well, this is China's right to defend its territory. But I think the key takeaway really, as you say, is that China has achieved parity or exceeded the US's military capabilities in some areas. The thing that was perhaps the biggest eye-opener, we talk about the nuclear warheads, but the biggest eye-opener and perhaps shows that there is some sort of strategy in the way that China is going about this, no doubt, in fact, is the development of its ballistic missiles. We are told that China has now got ground-launched cruise missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers compared to the conventional ground-launched ballistic missiles that the US holds with a range of just 300 kilometers. That's a big difference, as you can imagine. And these nuclear warheads that China has are designed to sit atop those missiles. So that's an area that it appears to have really closed the gap with the US, and of course it's something that Washington's going to be keeping a very close eye on. But we have to put that in perspective as well. Even if China does double the size of its nuclear warhead arsenal from the low 200s, it's estimated at the moment, it's still going to be way short of that figure that the US holds right now, as you say, 3,800 nuclear warheads. So it is still quite a long way to go. But as I say, it's no doubt something that Washington's going to be keeping keeping a very close eye on.
Rick, China has about 200 to 300 nuclear weapons, which in itself is a lot of nuclear weapons for a country to have. One wonders why China needs to double the size of its nuclear arsenal, because there are fears that it may spark a nuclear arms race with other superpowers around the world also wanting to increase their size of nuclear arsenals if China does it. But like you rightly mentioned, there are three key areas that the Pentagon report has identified in which China may have achieved parity or even exceeded the capabilities of American military. Now, that includes shipbuilding as well. Now, for long it has been believed that Americans hold an edge on the sea, but shipbuilding and, like you mentioned, cruise missiles and integrated air defense systems, it seems Beijing has taken long strides. How is this going to affect the relations between Beijing and Washington now?
Well, I don't think it comes as any surprise that China's trying to catch up with the US, and it is a concern given the state of relations between Washington and Beijing, and particularly because there has been lots of friction in the South China Sea and over Taiwan in particular. But I think one thing that's important to note is perhaps the timing of the release of this report by the Pentagon and how that plays out into the Trump administration's presidential election campaign. Of course, Trump has talked about overhauling the US's nuclear arsenal, giving it a complete workover and spending possibly up to $1 trillion over the next 30 years to do that. If he were out, Joe Biden comes in, does that change? We don't know. So perhaps there is some sort of underlying message that's coming from the Pentagon on this report in itself. I think it's also important to talk about Russia in the context of all of this as well. You mentioned it a moment ago. Of course, the US is in discussions with Moscow on whether or not to extend its treaty to limit its nuclear capabilities. China doesn't want to be involved in those discussions, but Beijing says this is just a pretext for the US to walk away from those talks altogether.
Patrick Falk, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly, this Pentagon report will raise eyebrows and ring alarm bells in the corridors of power in Washington, and we'll keep coming back to you for all the developments on the story.